3, 2, 1.
Welcome very much to Conversation. A pleasure to welcome to the program my dearest friend in New York City, I think from a long time, decades going back, and that's Nita Renfrew. She's here, and we're going to be talking about, apparently, among other things, our beautiful, totally just treatment of the Indian peoples that have been characteristic of the American experience, that there's never been a treaty broken or anything like that with them. We've just held, with the United States representatives have been totally just and upfront with the Indian peoples. That's what we're going to be talking about, right?
Well, I think you just said it all, Harold.
We're going to be talking about the exact opposite of what I just said, yes. But anyway, welcome. It's so good to see you. And we were talking, I was watching the president last night as he gave the State of the Union. You were doing some important understanding about the Indian treaties. That's what we largely want to talk about, right?
I was doing some homework on them because,
right.
you know, it's like I read a lot.
Yeah, I know you
but,
do.
You know, I don't remember everything.
You don't?
I remember everything generally. So then if I write something, I have to go back and look for all the references.
Right.
And I didn't have time to do all of that. But, you know, I did some. And I want to bring up, you know, it's like this thing about the broken treaties is a thorn in the side of this country. One, because it's injustice that's ongoing. I mean, the treaties are continuing to be broken. One of the reasons today is that half of the uranium in the country is on Indian reservations.
Yeah, and there's economic value there.
25% of the oil, and 25% of the coal, and 20% of the oil, and a lot of other minerals, gold and so on.
Right.
And we systematically go in and, you know, take over these lands and turn them into national, I don't know, forests or something, and then lease them out for nothing to these giant corporations. And the Indians don't get any benefit out of it, even though these lands were part of their treaties with the government. And not only that, they get their water is polluted and the ground is polluted with the uranium and so on. So it's actually destroying their livelihood and so on.
See what happened up in Flint with the water?
What happened?
Flint, they turned it was the governor of the state or the first. They cut off the good water and put in this other water that's going to poison people. And who's the guy that lives up in Travis? The famous guy, the media guy who does, Michael Moore. Michael Moore is suing them. Is suing the government of Michigan, and it's getting a lot of traction that it was just an unconscionable act.
Well, they do this systematically on the reservations.
Yeah, this is for the city
and it never,
these are some wasps.
And it doesn't really get into the, you know, to the mainstream media in any meaningful way.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, the thing is, you know, I want to go back to the whole thing of Wounded Knee.
All right.
Wounded Knee was that standoff, which I know you well remember, from 1973, when on the Pine Ridge Reservation at the Wounded Knee village, which is on Wounded Knee Creek, the Lakota Indians and all of AIM, American Indian Movement, they had a standoff with the FBI, and it was an armed standoff. And Russell Means and Dennis Banks and Clive Belcourt and so on were, you know, they were the main leaders.
Vernon Bellecourt. Did you know Vernon? Vernon Bellecourt?
Vernon Bellecourt. But he wasn't present at Wounded Knee.
Wounded Knee, but he was part of the American Indian Movement.
Oh yeah, he was an important part. But his brother Clyde was actually,
Vernon Bellecourt was a great guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Great guy, a dear friend of mine. And Stokely Carmichael was very tied into it.
Very tied into it.
Yeah, but he was Kwame Ture.
Well, what happened there was that there was a standoff for 71 days by the AIM movement. Basically, they were asking for a review of the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty with the Sioux, and that treaty came about because the American government had been trying to take the lands away from the Indians. Well, actually, they had signed a treaty in the 50s, and the Indians, because the Indians won all of the military standoffs with the government, so the government was actually acquiescing.
Winners are supposed to write the rules.
Exactly. Well, the Indians were the winners at the time.
Yeah, but why didn't they write all the rules?
Well, they did.
No, they did.
They did.
It was written in that in mind. Yeah, okay,
exactly.
Really.
So
well,
the Indians gave.
Odd,
the Indians gave in 1868. They gave the right of way to go through their lands. But then the American government started building forts on the lands, which wasn't part of what was agreed in the treaty. So they started having these wars with them, and then they sent Custer out there to find gold. He found gold, and then all the settlers started flooding in, and eventually they just sort of started, taking away. What they did was they basically starved the Indians. So the Indians never lost battle or anything, but they killed all the buffalo, so they didn't have anything to hunt anymore. And this is very sort of simplistic, but this is essentially what happened. They starved them, and in the treaties, the United States was supposed to give them allocations of cattle and all sorts of things to compensate for for having taken a lot of land and so on. And they would hold back on this, and so the Indians were starving. So eventually they just sort of started turning themselves in, and they killed Sitting Bull, who was the big chief, and Crazy Horse who was the big chief, and then Red Cloud, who was the remaining one. He basically felt that it was better for his people who were starving to death to eat than to die. So
people have to take that pragmatic attitude.
Exactly. So that's what happened, and it's very cold up there. You come from
I know.
there.
Well,
a lot of snow and so on.
I'm not over in Dakotas. I don't know how they survive.
But, So what happened?
But I'm weak. I'm a weakling. I like
we're hot house
75
flowers.
degrees.
We're hot house flowers. So at a certain point, it's like Custer lost the battle and so on with the Indians and so on, but the situation continued.
Was he killed there? He was killed.
He was killed.
Right,
He was killed. And actually, the Indians say that actually, I think Russell Means in his book says that he wasn't killed, but because the Indians thought that he wasn't worth killing.
Wow.
That was their sort of, and that he sort of, I think he says he committed suicide or something, because nobody has ever been able to identify who killed him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Okay. So anyway, it's sort of a mystery. But anyway, he died and lost the battle and so on. When Red Cloud turned himself in, and then the other people with Crazy Horse and so on started turning themselves in, and Crazy Horse was killed, and that was the time when the ghost dance came into being, and the ghost dance was really about, there was a prophet in, I guess he was a Paiute, Wovoka, and the story goes in several ways, but one of the stories is that he visited in the spirit world with Jesus, and Jesus said, I came to the white people and they killed me, so now I'm coming back as an Indian, and all of the white people are going to die, and the Indians are all going to come back to life, the ones that have been killed, and they're going to have grasslands, and the buffalo are going to come back, and all this. And they got into doing this dance, this ghost dance.
Yeah, ghost dance. Yeah.
And, the ghost dance was really, it wasn't a violent dance, but the American government got very jittery about it, because these Indians would dance.
PR value.
The PR value.
Yeah.
And they would dance in trance and so on. And so they started to shut it down. Well, it came to the Lakotas, and Chief Bigfoot was one of the last groups of people out there, and he decided to turn himself in, and he was coming in with about 375 of his people, over 200 of them women and children, and he decided to go to Pine Ridge, to Wounded Knee, to Pine Ridge, to turn himself in. And he had pneumonia, and he was actually spitting blood, and there was snow out there and everything. And there was a massacre. The U.S. government, brought out their cannons, and they shot most of these people, mostly women and children, in cold blood. Yeah. So that was the last a really big massacre that happened with the Indians.
But the longer saga of the relationship with the indigenous people in North America and the Europeans is a pretty grim one, right from the beginning, right?
But
is it characteristic of the whole planet?
Well, what I wanted to say was that this massacre at Wounded Knee was why in 1973 they had the standoff in Wounded Knee, because they were commemorating that last massacre.
Didn't they seize a thing in Washington?
Well, that was before the Bureau of Land Management building and so on.
And also Alcatraz or something.
And Alcatraz, that was even before. And so at Wounded Knee, they had a standoff for 71 days, and they were basically claiming, hey, you know, we're a sovereign nation under the 1968 treaty, the 1868 treaty, and we want, you know, congressional hearings, and we want this to be reviewed by the White House and so on, and we want, you know, some kind of redress. Well, there was a medicine man, Fool's Crow, who was actually credited. He was an elder. He was already in his 80s, I guess, at the time, and he went in and out mediating. And in his memoir, he basically says, I wasn't trying to get justice, I was trying to save lives on both sides.
Yeah. Well, that can be a marvelous
to get the standoff to end, because the traditional Indians realized, they said, you know, there are too many white people. We can't win against them.
And also, you know, in advanced technology.
Exactly.
And the means for measuring what we call power.
So he basically thought, you know, it's no use losing our best young men when we're going to lose this war anyway.
Well, that's an attitude that's probably been more characteristic of the development of many parts of the world, where an overwhelmingly powerful element comes into accord or comes into relationship with a weaker one. They conquer.
Well, so what happened was that,
and that's the first law of international law: is you got the right to conquer.
Fool's Crow.
You have to let that. You have to let that is, in my way of thinking, has done some, you know, international law and that kind of stuff. The first thing is, to be realistic, you have to allow the right to conquer, because some tribes are able to conquer others. Some people are stronger than others. They have to be allowed to conquer and not have their legitimacy questioned.
But the whole point, but what they negotiated with the government, they negotiated an end to the standoff, and the Indians agreed.
Back to the specifics.
The Indians agreed to lay down their weapons and come out, and the U.S. government promised not to arrest anybody, and they also promised that they would have high-level talks about the broken treaties with the White House.
Oh, okay.
And they had already been talking to people like Leonard Garment and so on in the Nixon House, which was high level. Those were
right.
You know,
You're right. Yeah.
So,
and this is part of the record. Yeah, right.
So Dennis Banks was one of the people there, and he foresaw that the U.S. government was going to break the promise and arrest them, because they always broke every promise with the Indians.
Right.
So he got out of there. He escaped out of there the night before they turned themselves over.
That's recognized, I guess, on all sides, that they've broken every treaty. That's just sort of recognized.
That's recognized. That's recognized as truth.
And we go from there.
We go from there. And, meaning the treaties still stand, you see, but they're being broken continuously. So,
what good is a treaty if it can be just with no question or recourse?
So what happened was so they arrested everybody, but they didn't get Dennis Banks. He was a fugitive for quite a long time, which is what they really wanted. And Russell Means wasn't there because he had gone out to I think because he had a trial or something, because they were always being tried and everything, and harassed, and they didn't let him back in. But and then they had a meeting at Fool's Crow's house was set up for these high-level White House people to come and talk about the broken treaties. Well, they sent low-level people who had no authority to anything. They were just a bunch of nice guys. And the Indians protested, and so they set up another date, and no one turned up. And then Leonard Garment sent a message saying, this is not a matter for the White House. It's a matter, you know, treaties are a matter for the Congress.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah.
But they had already promised that, you know, in good faith to do this, and then they didn't even talk to them.
Right.
So what happened is that, you know, there was a lot of coverage of this. There was a lot of sympathy for the American Indians and so on.
And I think there is still.
And there is still. And I feel that this needs to be brought back. And I'm not anybody. I don't have a platform. I don't belong to a group. I don't talk to American Indians because they don't actually like white people. You know, they see us as meddling in their affairs. Because there's a lot of political confusion there and so on, except for some of them, you know. So, you know, I'm just doing this because I just really feel badly about what's happening in this country and what's happening to this country. And I think we need to go back to the very beginning. You know, like this is before slavery, before anything. We took this land from another people, and we have continuously broken, and they actually agreed to these treaties at different times, and we continue to break them. Now the 68 treaty, the 1868 treaty stated that no change could be made to that treaty without 3/4 agreement by adult Sioux Indians. And the Americans
Yeah.
they've falsified that. They got children to put their fingerprint or their
Yeah.
X's on things and said they were adults. And I mean, it's like it's been trickery after trickery. They got them to sign things that they couldn't read in English, and they were translating them wrong to them. I mean, it's been horrible. But I want to go back to 1973 and say, let's have congressional hearings and
Yeah.
let's look at this.
Yeah.
Let's look at what happened.
Yeah.
Let's look at the treaties.
Is it part of a larger pattern? There are people, immigrant groups.
Well, this is what we're doing all over the world.
No,
This is what we're
the
doing.
history of the world you're talking about, that a group will hoodwink and wink and take advantage of the weaker peoples?
Well, I think it's the history of this country, certainly.
Isn't it the history of the world?
I'm concerned about this country because I pay taxes here and I'm a citizen here.
Fair enough. Okay, and it should
And
be
that's,
looked at.
you see, so I feel I'm doing this because I
Can
feel
we go
an
back
obligation.
and make up for? I mean, history is a funny thing because it was made within a certain context, and now we're living in a different context of what's possible. We could have a peaceful situation between peoples in a way that we weren't able to do
Exactly.
in the past. We were all limited by the constrictions of a very parsimonious kind of environment in general for everybody. So for some group to win, they had to defeat another or conquer another or do whatever more in the past than is
We don't have to
currently
do
the
that
case.
anymore.
Well, perhaps. But is it possible to go back and remake history? Because the condition then had to be that way, or else it wouldn't have
There was an Indian Reorganization Act in the 30s here, which was almost a duplicate of the Bantustan Act in South Africa.
Thank you.
Which
Okay.
legitimized apartheid. And basically what it did was it set up tribal councils that were voted on by Indians. When they did things by consensus, they weren't voting, and it was in conjunction with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the BIA. Well, the BIA is the U.S. government, so always the people who get into power are the people who are corrupt and in bed with the BIA, and then the traditionals don't vote because it's
within
not
the tribal
exactly.
states,
So it basically legitimized a so-called apartheid in this country.
Apartheid, the running dogs of the
and
system.
So and it's like, and then what they did was they had a relocation program where they were inducing Indians. They destroyed the economy of the Indians because
of their economy.
Their
to make
economy.
way for another economy.
Well,
perhaps.
what it did was that then the United States started saying, well, we'll pay your bus tickets or your plane tickets to go to Los Angeles or wherever, and we'll find you a job in the slum somewhere, putting
Mohawks
screws in it.
became great workers of steel.
Exactly. Well,
particularly, they were known for that.
But what happened was that they wanted to get the Indians off the reservation so they could take the rest of it.
Right.
And now what they're doing is they're because there's a lot of alcoholism and so on. There's no jobs. There's no economy on these places.
Alcoholism can easily follow.
So they go and they
conditions,
take their children away and they put them in foster homes outside of the reservation. You see, so that they don't grow. And before that, they put them in these schools that were run by the churches and so on. They wouldn't allow them to speak their own language, or they would wash their mouths out with soap and so on. And they wanted to beat the Indian out of them and turn them into white people. But
that's the history of the world.
So now they're taking them into these foster and Danny Sheehan, who heads the Romero Institute. He's the guy who he litigated the Pentagon Papers, the Karen Silkwood case, the Iran Contra, and so on.
Okay, good.
Danny Sheehan.
You in touch with him?
I'm not in touch with him, but I want to be, because I was going to say one way to get get congressional hearings is to touch on the right people and to get a couple of allies who can actually rally the people in the Congress or in the Senate.
Have there been attempts to do that over the decades past, and could we draw upon those, or were they failures, or what was our record?
I used to do public affairs counseling, and I'm out of the ballpark now. I don't, that was back in the 80s. I don't know anybody in Washington anymore, but I know how these things happen. And they don't happen because you sign petitions and because you go visit your congressman and so on. No, you have to get somebody who's in a powerful position as an ally, and then their staff director or their person who's designated for this will actually know who all of the possible allies are, will take you around, will set up the appointments.
Yeah.
And I'm oversimplifying too.
No, that's true.
And,
That's the way
and you
PR.
rally, behind the scenes, you rally the works in order to get the congressional hearings to happen. You see, so you have to find out who it's going to benefit, who it's going to, what, I mean, I don't know, maybe somebody wants to say, and it'll probably be a Republican, because Republicans like to get, they like to get results on specific things.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the Democrats always say, well, the system should fix it. So it's harder to work with Democrats in a situation like that. If you can get a Republican congressperson who's into human rights, and they are, into human rights or into some kind of land justice or something, and I don't know who that is. But that's why I would approach somebody like Danny Sheehan or even Ralph Nader or Winona LaDuke, who was his vice presidential candidate.
Ralph Nader, is he still kicking it?
He's in Washington. He has a wonderful newsletter. This guy is aware of everything.
Yeah, he is. He's really
he knows.
We did a program with Tony here, and and Jill Stein's running the Green Party people.
He knows where all the bodies are buried. He knows. So if you could get him, he would. These people would know who your possible allies are that you could approach.
Yeah.
You see, because you can't just go around and do it yourself. You have to have allies inside the Congress, somebody who wants to get some results on this.
Right.
And that's what I would do.
Are there people of that nature? Are there institutions existing, or are there groups or something that have a location of people you can get in touch with?
Then you would get.
Are there sites on the internet of people that are trying to do this or have tried to?
Well, then you would go. You see, I talked to a lot of people. Like even when I was doing the public affairs programs and so on, and I talked to a lot of people in governments and so on. And people don't want to understand how to do this. Like they really think that you just, basically most people think that the government is hearing their message. They think, they think that because they're putting out whatever, that everybody knows what they want.
Paper once
when
in a while,
the reality is that, it's like, in order to get somebody to hear your message politically, you have to go about it's like running a political campaign.
Right.
Most politicians, when they get into the game, they think that everybody knows what they think and so on. And the biggest problem that political consultants have is getting them to understand
disabuse them of that.
Listen, it's like you're shouting in the closet.
Right.
It's like, and to the choir, you need, it's like, it doesn't mean that Joe Smith down the street knows what you're saying and he's ignoring you. No, you have to find a way to get that message to him. And that's what political consultants do. And I worked for a political consultant like that, Joe Napolitan, who was a big political consultant. He worked on the Kennedy campaign, and then he worked on a lot of foreign campaigns like Giscard d'Estaing, the Venezuelan, a lot of winning candidates and so on. So he was like a really big shot, and he had a company, Public Affairs Analysts, and I worked for him. And he ran the Public Affairs Department like this.
When was that you worked?
This was back in the late 70s, early 80s.
Late 70s, early. Okay, yeah.
So I worked on programs like this, and I saw how different it is, and I saw the meetings with Joe Napolitan where people would come in and it would be really difficult to get them to understand that, just because you publish these papers and these books and everything, it doesn't mean that the people you want to hear them have heard them. It's like when you send out an email with an attachment. It doesn't mean anybody reads it.
Yeah, right. No, I understand.
So basically, people think if I
so
send out 50,000 attachments, everybody. Well, no, maybe nobody read it.
Yeah. But you think that they did, perhaps, or they like to think that they did. And then there's a whole lot of subgroups developing.
Politicians and people like that have egos, so they.
Yes, usually they do. Yeah.
It's like people who come on your show. We all think that we're going to come here and that our issue is the most important. I mean, you've told me that our most and we're going to change things and so on. And I'm here in all humility. I don't expect to change anything. The only thing I'm hoping for is maybe a seed, because I just feel it's on my conscience.
You feel guilty.
As an American.
You feel guilty as an American.
I feel responsible. I feel and so if somebody hears this, and maybe nobody will, and gets the message, I will be happy.
Maybe something get going. Yeah.
Maybe somebody will understand that you have to do something different from what you're doing. you know.
Something is that you have to move toward a more practical kind of mindset, or what
Well, you have
does
to do something
what
like what I'm saying. You have to figure out who your allies are in the Congress if you want to get hearings to happen.
Yeah, Congress is hard to get
It's
to.
hard. It's not an easy nut to
Also,
crack.
you're not doing something that's easy to attach a material gain to, or
But it's
money.
possible.
Money, and
Well, you might find somebody who hates oil companies. I don't know. You know, it's like somebody who was done in by one.
Yeah,
or
right,
didn't
right.
get his campaign contribution.
Yeah, it's how the whole political process works.
I mean,
yeah.
you find something that somebody is interested in.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why you need to talk to somebody who's like sort of an insider.
So
in
I
order
didn't
to
know you
try
were
to
so
identify.
involved in this with the Amerindian movement and stuff like
Well,
that.
I'm
I've known you
involved-
for thousands of years, and not thousands, but a lot.
I'm involved
And
because
you-
I do healing.
Yeah.
You know, the
you
energy
have.
healing.
Yeah.
And I work with the energies of this land,
Yes.
energies of this land. And I'm a pipe carrier.
And Greenland, you were in Greenland. You went to Greenland and saw the melting of the glaciers there. And you're into the global warming thing, I presume,
yeah,
right?
but I'm into the Indian thing because that's that's the healing in this land.
Oh,
And
in this country.
in
All
this
right,
country.
yeah.
And this and the other thing I wrote
There
an
are
article.
indigenous people all over the world.
I
And they've
wrote
all
an-
been treated badly, I think, by
I
and
wrote an
large.
article
Yeah.
that was published this summer in Contemporary Shamanism, of which
Oh.
I'm an editor, because I do shamanic work too, which is part of energy work. And the article is about.
What shaman? What's the
well, let me tell you
energy
what
work?
let me
but
tell you what
okay.
the article is about.
Yeah, right.
Basically, it has been found, and it was found by Louis Mail Madrona, who's a medical doctor, professor at many universities,
Yeah.
and he's Lakota and Cherokee, practices indigenous healing alongside his straightforward Stanford University medical stuff and professorship. And I'm a student of his, and he discovered that osteopathy.
What is that exactly?
Osteopathy is a medical field. Osteopaths practice osteopathy.
That's kind of medicine, but different or something.
Well, it's different because
I've forgotten what the difference
they
is.
manipulate the bones and everything. And
yeah, they're not MDs.
They are MDs.
They
in this
are
country.
MDs.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
okay,
yes,
okay.
yes,
Good.
yes.
I wasn't sure. Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't initially, but the classical osteopaths are. But in this country now they're MDs, and they've been taken over actually by
the medical.
They sort of lost their osteopathic side, but. Andrew Taylor Still was the man who he was an MD, late 19th century, early 20th century. He created the field of osteopathy. He was a medical doctor.
Again, when?
In early 20th century.
Early 20th.
Okay,
yeah.
And it turns out that osteopathy comes out of the traditional American Indian bodywork.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Of any particular group of Indians?
Well, he lived on the Shawnee Reservation for many years.
It's west.
In Kansas, because they were relocated. They were originally down south in North Carolina, Tennessee.
That Trail of the Tears with the Creek. Is it the?
That was the Cherokee.
Cherokee. Yeah.
Okay, but they were neighbors of the Cherokee.
Yeah.
Okay. So Lewis's grandmother was a Cherokee healer, but Lewis learned Cherokee body work from Cherokee Indians when he decided he wanted to learn his own traditions. So when he went to an osteopath many years later, which is the past few years,
he felt at home.
Well, he said, this is what I learned is Cherokee body work.
Right.
So he began investigating.
This is worth looking into. Yeah, I know about it. Yeah.
Andrew Taylor Still lived on the Shawnee Reservation, and there is a Shawnee Cherokee reservation.
Where is it?
In Kansas.
In Kansas.
In Kansas.
Yeah, okay.
So there is a lake there. So we know that it came from the Shawnee. Now, Andrew Taylor Still's father was a missionary and physician on the Cherokee Reservation. And Andrew Taylor Still was his helper, was his assistant for many years, because that's how you learned medicine in those days. You sort of apprenticed with a doctor.
Yes, right.
And then you went to school and so on.
Law was done like that, too.
He lived there. He knew the language perfectly and so on. So we gather that's where he learned. So this body work probably existed amongst many tribes, and it's the foundation. It's what craniosacral therapy comes out of.
I don't know what that is.
Well, craniosacral therapy is something that's very popular, and it comes out of it's an osteopathic thing. Massage therapists do it, and people like that, and polarity, which is another energy form of healing, which were both created by students of Andrew Taylor Still. But they're considered to be Western. But in fact, it was the Indians who were doing this.
But it was through this body work and this kind of thing, because you were always in Reiki, you've done that kind of stuff and other things.
Exactly.
And it was through that.
So that's how I came.
That was the avenue by which you became interested in this question of the Indian peoples.
Of the Indians.
It was through that.
And our relationship with
doorway,
them. And the injustices.
Yeah. And you've always been interested in justice.
I'm always interested.
And I'll tell you, if you're interested in trying to deal with injustice, there's a wide tablet you can work upon.
I know, it's a never
in the human society, it's sort of, north, south, east, west, and all points in between.
Stay alive.
Or at least you see it that way. You can see things that way. It is really something else. The situation of injustice. Do you think? And this could be something where it gets something going that could be not only just exactly the immediate issues involved, but have ramifications toward a larger justice movement that would involve more. A lot of people are being treated unjustly.
Yeah,
in this country and in the world.
Exactly.
But these could be people who could be leading. These are the people who led. And then you got all the people that were slaves, for crying out loud.
Well, the other thing about
slaves.
But I think the American Indian thing is primary.
Yeah, right. It's all they were first.
About the land.
First people.
The doctrine of discovery is based on Christians can take the land from. People who don't have,
Well, I think it's mostly just power politics, and whoever's got politics. The gun can conquer the other. That's
but
what
the Supreme Court ruled on the basis of the doctrine of discovery for land ownership in this company, and it was Marshall who ruled that that land ownership is based on Indians have the right of occupancy, but the whites have the right of possession of the property. So the Indians don't have the right of possession. Now that all comes out of Locke, you see, which is a problem because out of Britain, because Locke basically he was a philosopher, and he basically whoever works the land owns it, and the Indians in the eyes of the white weren't working the land.
No.
They were just wandering around killing animals and so on.
Right.
And we sort of overlooked the ones who were growing corn and squash and other things and so on.
Yeah.
But that's that. So the Americans, even people like Thomas Jefferson and so on, who is a hero of mine, unfortunately, they didn't understand this. They came out of a world where you basically thought of the land as belonging to those who worked it.
Yeah.
So
okay,
but we can't think that way anymore. And the other reason I'm thinking about it is because,
why can't we think that way
well,
anymore?
Because it isn't right.
It isn't right.
It isn't right. Meaning, it's like.
What about the trends? The trends or tides of history in the development in a larger issue?
Well, there are things that are right, and there are things that aren't right. And
that's moral.
Louis Mail Madrona quoted Thomas Merton to me recently.
Thomas Merton, 7-Story Mountain.
And he said to me, Thomas, because I was talking to him about, we're putting together a whole program to teach Louis and this Kata, which is Center for Advanced Therapeutic Arts, and myself are putting together a one-year program to teach this Cherokee or traditional American Indian bodywork, along with osteopathy.
Wonderful.
And I'm doing it because I want.
Does it relate to Reiki, or
it does relate
your work
to
in Reiki informs what you're doing?
It informs it.
Okay.
I'm doing it because I think the Indians need to get credit for it, and they need to get credit for something that is incorporated into the mainstream health.
They need to get credit for something because they've been treated dismally, beyond belief, dismally.
So it's part of restoring, their heritage of, healing that whole genocide that we perpetrated on them.
Yeah.
And so this comes out of that, and I'm sitting here thinking, we need to have congressional hearings on this. So we're not going to Washington to say repair this and let's have hearings. And
couldn't we have hearings in the General Society of university seminars or something?
If we couldn't
just to get the facts straight. Do we have the facts straight?
The facts are all out there.
The facts are there.
But they need to be put on a platform where they can't be ignored.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's like a PR thing.
So
it's
maybe,
like a PR thing.
Maybe
you think the issues are well enough understood, and the issues are clear enough, particularly in terms of
the
justice.
Documents and everything.
It's all there. Yeah, I guess it's all accepted generally. And how does American and world society accept the idea that some people are conquered by people and have to adjust to the fact that they've lost and become slaves to the people who conquered them.
In this country,
that's been the way the world has worked for a few thousand years.
There's a book by Vine Deloria Jr., who was also
I don't know
a Lakota.
that name
He's
at all.
a preeminent American Indian scholar. Was a lawyer and also a religious scholar, taught at several universities, wrote a lot of books, died a few years ago. And Vine Deloria in 1972 published a book, which is God is Red, where he basically talked about this and said, I want to try to codify what Indian religion is. And there are a lot of similarities between the different tribes, but I'm going to try to codify the Sioux way and so on.
Go ahead. Go ahead. What? Come in.
Yeah, what happened?
What's the deal? Sound? Oh, who's hers? You got her phone. Yeah, get her microphone. There's a phone. Yeah, we'll get it. We'll get the microphone. Thanks, Brian. Yeah.
So.
Go ahead, get it.
So I wonder how much okay. So Vine Deloria writes God is Red, and he basically
that'll pick it up good and strong now there.
Codifies the American Indian
I hadn't noticed that.
religion and so on, and also and compares and describes Christianity from an Indian point of view.
Yeah.
And basically what he says, which is correct, he says, Christianity became a European thing, but they brought in this whole thing in Genesis of man being given dominion over the creatures and everything, and Adam and the fallen, this and that and the other, and that by association everything else was fallen, and so therefore Christianity, this Christian exceptionalism of wanting to be universal and spread it everywhere, and that basically Christians are better than other people, the chosen people, which we inherited from the Jews.
Everybody seems to have come up with the thing where our people better than the rest.
Exactly.
That's the history of the world.
Okay.
If you've got the guns to enforce it, or the clubs.
So Europe then brings us here, and they basically say, well, these people are not quite human.
Yeah, right.
So if you're not human, then we have dominion over you.
You can do whatever, like a deer or a buffalo or anything. Yeah, right.
And then the idea was, well, how do we make, because they're good Christians, so they want to do what's right. How do we turn them into humans? Well, you turn them into humans by taking the Indian out of them, forcing them into these schools not allowing them to speak their language. And the other thing, Indians systematically, they always gave everything away because the goal was to not own a lot. So they forbade their potlatch ceremonies where they gave away things because they said they have to develop a sense of ownership.
You got to beat that out of them,
once they have a sense of ownership, then they're going to become
greed. They got to learn greed.
They got to learn greed.
We're going to teach greed. Greed 101. Yes.
And that's
the thing number one.
And then they'll be part of the system. Yeah. And what Russell Means does, which is very interesting, he says, he basically says the problem is that industrialization, meaning the European model is one of industrialization, and he says capitalism and Marxism are both sides of the same coin because they both need to have workers and to producing things and proletariat and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And neither one of them respects the world, the nature or anything. They both are trying, because in industrial world, and even with big agriculture, you're controlling nature.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So the land belongs to you, but for the Indians, you belong to the land, so you need to respect it.
Yeah, but then you got to get over that.
So they said, well, we got to get them over that so that they can then become white people.
Right. Like us.
Like us. And then they'll be okay.
Yeah, right.
Then they'll...
Well, that's the attitude, I suppose, that's the attitude of the people at the court of Julius Caesar and so forth, through any kind of empire thing that existed.
But the problem now is that this has gone...
people out in Palestine
this has come to the point... Well, the Israelis studied the American takeover of the Indians and so on to apply it to the Palestinians. They looked at that very carefully.
And that's another thing. Every spring they go mow the lawn, they call it.
And they all justify it, and they say, well, that's what you did. You know? And we say, and we're still doing it, because we still haven't completely.
Well, this could be an avenue. This could be an avenue of travel or an avenue of activity or something like that could get you in not only the ideas in the immediate sense that you're dealing with, but as it relates to broader issues of the human condition. That because it's built upon injustice practically all of the major institutions that we have, and it may be coming to a time where we'll be able to get past some of the mistakes that were made in the development. And do you think we're getting to a point where we can have real justice rain down on the planet? We have a capability of that we didn't have any time in history.
What people like,
that's what I'm trying to get
like
at.
Russell Means say, and this is, he can see it there. Where white men fear to tread. This is Russell Means' autobiography, and it's a description of the whole AIM movement and so on, and I recommend it to everyone.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Russell Means basically, because he ran for vice president once with Larry Flynt, remember?
No, I don't remember.
Well, anyway, when Flynt was running for president.
In what context? What political
Larry Flynt, the Hustler.
The Hustler magazine. Was it a political thing or something?
Yeah, he was running for president.
Did they have a party or something?
No, he just had a lot of money. And
like Trump.
he approached Russell Means, and Russell Means agreed because he said, well, anything to get the platform of the American Indians out there, so I'll run with the Hustler guy, you know.
Yeah, right.
But then he pulled out because he said it turned out that Larry Flynt was only wanting to get attention for himself. But he said that he says in the book that when he ran, he realized that we have to gain freedom for all Americans in order for the Indians to have freedom. All Americans. Because he said, I can see that the same methods that they were applying to us on the reservations, they're now applying to all of the Americans and taking away their rights and their freedoms and controlling their education and their health care and
the basis of a lot of the alienation that exists very widespread.
So he said they're doing the same thing to everybody. So he said, I'm for freedom of everybody. And if you recall, I made a program with you a few years back.
Yeah, we made many, but I don't remember
But I talked about his document.
I do remember, right.
Where he said, welcome to the reservation to all white people. And he said, now you've all lost the Constitution. First it was us, and now it's all of you.
There's a lot of people who feel that, both on the left and the right in the normal political party.
So the
basis of Mr. Trump, and the basis of Bernie Sanders.
So like his last years, he was saying, look, we need to get back the Constitution.
Yeah, well, that can go across the right to
for
left,
everybody, for the Indians and for the white people and for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think he was really the great prophet of the 20th century. I agree with Vine Deloria. It was not just for the Lakota.
Are there sites? Are there things going on in the internet? Are there groups or something that you can align with, or you have been in touch with, or that are growing that you can be in touch with, or others can be encouraged to get in touch with, that are going along these lines, you think, that are well for people to know about?
Well, I'm not I don't do Facebook or website, I'm not a computer person. I believe that...
It's very hard to be a PR person without being a computer person.
I'm not a PR person, I'm a healer. When I was doing the public affairs...
But you talk PR.
Well, because I did the public affairs, but the principles. So I learned what the principles are, but we didn't have Facebook and all that kind of stuff back in the 80s.
No.
And I believe that we need to get rid of electronic technology if we're going to survive.
I mean, it's not likely to happen.
It's going to happen because it's going to crash.
You think that? Why?
It's going to crash.
Oh, spell that out. What do you think?
Because it's making us less human.
Making us less human, or is it making us? You think the electronic communication?
Cell phones, where people are sitting there, and I mean, it's like, people don't communicate anymore. The young people don't know don't have any social skills. I mean, I had dinner with a young woman the other day who was telling me how this dynamic young artist in her 30s, intelligent and bright, and she was telling me, oh, I'm into, no GMOs, we got to eat organic food and we got to recycle stuff and climate stuff and everything. And then I said, well, we need to get rid of the electronic media because that's what's supporting all of this. And she said, oh, nobody's taking my cell phone away from me. And
I think there are people who would feel that way.
Well, I think almost everybody. And so
I had a meeting
and I told her, I said, well, it's like it's taking your freedom away.
Oh, I don't know.
And she said, with the surveillance, and so on, and the entrainment technology.
I think it's inevitable.
But she said,
like saying
I said there's an illusion of freedom, and she said, what difference does it make if it's a good illusion? Listen, at Yale University, they voted overwhelmingly to do away with the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, a few weeks ago on the campus.
Who would have done that? Why? I mean, okay.
They did a survey of it, and the people on the campus.
It calls for an understanding of history and what's going on and everything. You're essentially you're feeling negative about the march of history past. Was there a golden age when things were right?
Well,
I believe in
progress. I believe in cycles, not a linear history. Which is, you see, the way the Indians look at things.
That's true. They do. Yeah.
I subscribe to the Red Road, which is the Indian way.
I don't know what that is.
That's the Indian. That's the Indian way.
It comes in the mail, U.S. mail.
It comes in the mail.
They used to have a thing called U.S. mail. People, it was called. There was a world before the. Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah.
The Red Road is the way that the Indians take, the way your friend Vernon Belcourt.
I love Vernon very well. We were in Libya together with that thing when they celebrated. They put a lot into it. Muammar Gaddafi. I was really angry when Mr. Obama and NATO and Mrs. Clinton went and destroyed that country. He was really ahead of things in my way of thinking. It made a lot of sense to me. But Vernon was there, and they had a lot of money. And they had a thing where they celebrated human rights violations. That's what you're talking about with the Indians.
Yeah.
And they would celebrate somebody, and they gave a big amount of money to the group or something. The first one was Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela loved Gaddafi. And he was the first recipient. The people of the Stones in Palestine were the second. And the third were the Amerindians. And I went to the conference where they had all these people, and that's where Vernon and I were there, and did a program with Vernon, then Vernon Belcourt.
You should show that again.
Well, I could. Maybe I will. I can show it. Yeah, I could do that. And then also Stokely was there, Kwame Ture and everything. But it was really funny because they had the conferences. They had the poster boards and stuff. And it was a conference to celebrate the intrusion of the Red American Indian. They called it the Red American Indian. And they did, and they were all there. And Vernon was there, and they were dressed up in these magnificent costumes and everything. It was wonderful.
Well, Russell Means went to one of the things in Libya. Maybe he was there at that one too.
Yeah, that was really good, and it should be celebrated. The American, and the injustices. I don't quite understand about why the electronic. I don't know. It seems to me I did a thing the other day. I was talking to it in the program we did with Tony there a couple days ago. I was in Duane Reade the other day. There's not a corner in Manhattan that doesn't have a Duane Reade, it seems, anymore.
I know.
And I was in there buying a cookie or something, and there was a young lady behind the counter. She was black and very sweet and everything, and she was ringing up the receipts and all that. So I make conversation, and I said, "So are you in school, darling?" She's young. And she said, "No, I'm not." And I said, "You're not?" And she said, I said, "Well, have you been?" And then she sort of apologetically, she was a beautiful person, the spirit, although she was very, in a sense, humbled when she said it. She said, "I didn't even get out of high school." She wasn't being smart-ass.
Yeah.
She was being, and she was saying, "Maybe I should." And then I got talking to her. I said, "Well, you got these electronic devices, you got the whole world available to you. The whole world of the world's knowledge is available to you now. And you could be, with that availability that's there, you could be the smartest person in the world in terms of knowing things and still not have the qualification to be able to be successful of going to school." I don't think you want to get rid of the electronic communication.
Well, I do. Because
really, I can't understand that.
Okay,
it's got great potential for liberating the human spirit.
To start out with,
I think,
it causes cancer in people, and this has been the cell phones and everything, the low intensity radiation. Yes, and they've proven that.
Is that true?
There are many studies that show that. Yes. Yeah. 2, they're using it for surveillance.
Well, they're probably going to have to get to be where they're going to have surveillance of everything.
Okay.
I think they might have to have that in order for the system to work.
I can't believe you're saying that. Well, no. But I don't want the system to work. I want the system to collapse.
No, you don't want the system
I do.
Wait a minute, spell it out. You don't want the system to collapse.
I believe that civilization is the evil.
I reread. I reread the other day. Not reread. I went and looked at it. It's a huge tome. But I read it on the basis of something that was on television, the book Stress Test by Timothy Geithner. He's the one who set up the whole thing. And essentially what the issue of the thing, in 2008 and everything, and how they gave all this money to the banks and everything. And that's essentially what he said, and the president, that you had to give all this money to the people who had messed so many people's lives up. And so you had the main task of political responsibility was to save capitalism. That's the main thing, and that was the thing that motivated Franklin Roosevelt. You had to save capitalism from its own excesses, or else the world would fall into utter anarchy.
Well, it wasn't an
and
anarchy. There was no anarchy in this country before we brought capitalism.
You've never had the civilization fail. I mean, not only civilization, capitalism. You had to save capitalism, and that's the major responsibility.
No, but I don't agree.
You don't think that, and you said you want the system to collapse?
Yes.
You don't want the system.
Yes, I do.
You want the system to collapse in utter angrily, massive death, massive starvation, everywhere and everywhere.
It's going to collapse.
That's what would happen if there was
it's going to collapse of its own accord. But the other thing about
examined. You don't want that. How can you want there to be such a thing?
Okay, it's going to be terrible in the short run.
Short run.
Well, during our lifetimes. But the other thing that electronic technology is doing, it's destroying, the animals and nature and everything. I mean, it's like like in the north of Scotland, for instance, they found the sparrows were all disappearing, and they did a study and they found that they were disappearing because of the cell phone towers. So they moved the cell phone towers out away from the places where there were birds and so on, and the sparrows came back. Listen, I sit in Central Park and I talk to sparrows.
Had trouble. Yeah, I know you.
I talk to sparrows these days.
And you also have some turtles.
And I talk to a snapping turtle.
A snapping turtle scared the bejesus out of you.
It scared me.
It scared you.
And then it looked at me with compassion when it saw how afraid I was, and it backed off.
Wow.
It was about to eat my fingers, and it actually backed off when it saw the look on my face.
Right.
This comes out of my healing work, okay? But the American Indians understand this. You see?
They lived embedded in nature.
People down on Wall Street don't understand this.
No, I know. And that's why it's hard to understand why you'd want to save capitalism.
So I sit out there with the sparrows, and they're amazing, but they're disappearing. But a lot of tourists in Central Park now, you can't even walk with all the tourists. Yeah. And they stop and they talk to me when they see me with all these sparrows. I get hundreds of sparrows around me, and they sit on my knees and on the benches. Yes, I feed them sunflower seeds.
Oh, right.
And they come up. I mean, the other day a man came up to me and said, an older couple, and they said, we're from Amsterdam, and we don't have sparrows there anymore. They disappeared a few years ago.
We used to have sparrows in
Michigan. And he said, I'm so glad to see them. Yeah. Another man from Paris came over to me and said, I used to feed sparrows on the balcony of my apartment in Paris, and I haven't seen a sparrow for 2 or 3 years. I mean, I see people like this all the time, So ultimately, maybe eventually we'll only have sparrows in Central Park. But anyway, this is because, in large part, it's because of the cell phone towers. The cell phone towers and the emissions from the low intensity radiation and so on. Because one, it's destroying insects, so then they don't have anything to eat. But two, it's hurting their ability to orient themselves. In Spain, they did a study and they found that storks. Storks, they build their nests on poles and things, on rooftops. And they found that the storks are so when there are cell phone towers in the vicinity, they get confused and they build their nests on poles and where the eggs drop down to the ground and so on, and they can't build their nests and things like this. So and what it's doing to children. I mean, there's studies about what it's doing to children's brains and so on, because they don't have the protections that we have and so on. It's destroying. It's making us less human.
You don't think there's any progress being made toward anything? I
think it's the opposite. I think we're going backwards. So the next step is, chips in us, and I don't know, we're going to be cyborgs.
Well, it's hard to think because, what's his name?
I don't want to be a cyborg. I want to be a human. But it's getting hard to be a human because it's getting pretty lonely. out there.
so few.
No
so
one
few.
to talk
Every
to.
zombies walking
Everybody's
around.
sitting there.
It's true. They're all playing on that thing. Yeah.
And I don't have a smartphone. You know.
You're probably the only person in New York almost.
I have a cell phone because there are no public phones anymore. And sometimes you have, and I got one when my mother was in the hospital, and I kept it, but I only use it once every 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And the other day I was out there and I was trying to call a number to say I was going to be late, and I kept dialing it, and nothing would happen. And I finally asked a young guy walking down the street if he could help me. And it turned out I wasn't punching the send button. You know, it's like he couldn't believe.
You're inept.
He couldn't believe I didn't.
He said, "Well, you having trouble with electronic device?" I'm shocked. Well, I was in Corwood the other day like that, and all the booths are empty. I was in a big fancy hotel at a conference with a bunch of economists and stuff and lawyers, and all the phone booths were just beautiful hotel. Show them. Beautiful hotel with all these things, and they're all locked tight. There's no point in having them anymore.
Nobody.
Poor Mr. Superman used to have to jump in those phone booths to change into his Superman costume.
Yeah, what would he do now?
I don't know.
Jump into a cell phone?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, this idea about making some restitution with the history of the people who've been treated badly by the power structures of the world and historical pattern is great that you're doing that. And
who own this land?
Yeah.
Really.
Are you in touch with some of the people who are still fighting the good fight from the Indian perspective?
You know, I don't know who they are. It's like, because...
Yeah, I've lost touch, too.
You know,
Russell Did you know Dr. Joy?
I don't. Yeah. I never knew. But if he's around, I like... Russell Means died. Vine Deloria died. Dennis Banks is... I would get in touch with Dennis Banks. He's out on the reservation, the Ojibwe reservation, I think it was.
But he's part of your own larger way of reading things.
But this is just my own personal... I just go out and do things. You know, you can't wait. I mean,
You've had such an active life. You've been in touch with everything from the
I wouldn't want to be part of an organization that would want me, so I just had my own organization.
Yeah, right. Well, anyway, I'm glad you've been tracing that, and I'll have to I'll try and dig out that thing with...
Are we getting to the end?
Yeah, we are. We got about a minute left.
Okay,
I'm
going to put this is my fox hat.
There you go.
And this was I got this from the Tuscarora Indians.
That's really good. Show it. Look into the camera. Look straight. It'd be good if you can look into the camera. You've been looking at me.
And
so good.
It's a fox, and it has and because it comes from the Indians, I got it. It has the spirit of the fox in it intact.
All right.
And foxes get what they want. They're very wily.
Yeah, right.
So I'm putting this on because we're going to get well on our way to getting those congressional hearings or something similar.
I see. Okay.
So this fox is going to do that.
That's your fighting hat. I mean,
that's my
the thing that's going to get you right into the halls of Congress.
Exactly. I'm going to wear it to the hearing in the middle of July or August.
I hope you can pull it off in the name of
Well, with
Russell
the air
Banks
conditioning, it'll probably need it.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, it's your pleasure to have the perception of Nita Renfrew, a friend from way back. We go back 30 years or so. Way back, and she's been always on the edge of things, Greenland and all that kind of stuff. And she's doing a very interesting thing, and really good. You're picking up the issue of the injustices that have been so much a part of the history that we ought to visit and learn from and how to protect. Thank you for viewing. Thank you, Nita, for such a well-led life as we say goodbye, and we'll be coming back with conversations tomorrow on my Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Thanks, Nita, for coming. You look great.
Thank you.
I love your chapeau. Beautiful. Thank you for viewing. See you tomorrow. That's really good. Yeah, that's a book. You've been reading it looked like you got a lot of notes there.
I read it, but I went through it.